All right, here we are. Hey everyone, I'm Mick from Geyser, and here we're joined today by Kemal from Blink, and we're gonna be talking about something really, really exciting that I think you're gonna be hearing more and more about in the realm of Bitcoin, and especially has to do with Bitcoin adoption, and that's the subject of Bitcoin circular economies, how they're defined, how they're not defined, why what they are, why are they interesting, especially when it comes to the spread and adoption of Bitcoin. So really excited. I couldn't think of a better guest, especially for what they're doing in the world, especially in Africa and South America, than Kemal and Blink. We're gonna be really using as a backbone of this conversation the report that we recently put out called "The Case for Bitcoin Circular Economies," which was made possible by Blink and also Paystand. Um, and in this report, we really try to outline and kind of present the case, because I think a lot of people talk about circular economies, but there isn't and I think Bitcoin Beach and some other projects out there have put out white papers and so forth. But what we're trying to do here is kind of present a more generic kind of compendium of resources and a broad outline of, like, theoretically, how does this actually play out and support the case for Bitcoin adoption. So I'm really excited to kind of get into the weeds of it and to like the key arguments. um, but before that, just maybe it'd be also actually really good to get a few sentences and hear a little bit more about Blink's role, right? Because Blink is actually I've seen a lot of videos of people around the world using Blink, and I'm just be good to kind of get a little bit more about what Blink is doing to support Bitcoin circular economies and Bitcoin adoption in general.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Mick. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, my name is Kemal. I work with Blink. Blink is a bit wallet for Android and iOS, and that enables users to send and receive Bitcoin on-chain Lightning with a Bitcoin account and a dollar account, and a bunch of tools that we developed. And yeah, the origin is that Blink was born basically inside the Bitcoin Beach community in El Salvador around 2020. At that time, the name was Bitcoin Beach Wallet because it was tailored specifically to the needs of this community in El Zonte, who decided that they wanted to use Bitcoin for transactions, for payments, for their local economy in their village, because it was a cash-based economy. And yeah, like some payments are just very cumbersome to do with cash, or even in that environment at that time in El Salvador, quite dangerous. The government hadn't gotten rid of the gang problem in El Salvador at that time yet. It was known as the murder capital of the world at that time. So that has changed, but yeah, um, I guess like in the 21st century with the internet, and a lot of applications and services, like you can't pay an online service with cash. People need means of electronic payments, and yeah, so that's where it started. And yeah, very happy that you put this report together, because yeah, and I think it's like obviously not a part of Bitcoin that gets headlines in the New
Right.
York Times or in the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times. But I would argue that it is actually like the part of the Bitcoin movement that really pushes the frontier of Bitcoin towards the world that we want to see, where Bitcoin is global money and yeah, like replaces the defunct fiat system that we've been using. And for us at Blink, it's very natural to sponsor this report because we exist because of this movement. And yeah, like the tools that we built are built from real community needs, like trial accounts, stable sats that powers the dollar account, so people can get into Bitcoin, get out of Bitcoin as their individual circumstances require, and point of sale and pay codes and stuff. It's being used in more than 20 communities worldwide ever since Bitcoin Beach took off, by inspiring or even the government of El Salvador to make Bitcoin legal tender in the first sovereign nation on the world. We know that things have changed a little bit, like the fiat empire has awakened and didn't want to accept the rebels just going ahead and using sound money. So there has been some regression on that end with the Bitcoin law. But you know, the more important thing is like Blink spread out from El Zonte, from Bitcoin Beach to Bitcoin Circular Economies worldwide. Bitcoin Circular Economies spread out from Bitcoin Beach to the world, inspired by what the team in El Zonte did. And we see like replications by Bitcoiners in their respective own communities, particularly in the global south, where the traditional financial system is not working for the people that live there. And Bitcoin is a no-brainer alternative that solves a pressing need for them.
Awesome. Yeah, very good introduction. And it's kind of a no-brainer, actually, kind of what what Blink really brings, right? It almost seems like such a silly thing to not have existed before, but I guess it could have really happened only thanks to Lightning, and you guys built on top of it, so that makes total sense in terms of the timelines. But yeah, it's such a powerful, simple tool, and I'd also like to also kind of talk about one really cool feature that I really think it's great, which is the ability to easily allow people the social aspect, which is allowing people to make it easier for people to onboard others into Blink and easily accept digital money, right? Bitcoin digital money. As you said, people may have cash, but they don't have the like banking infrastructure. So we can talk a little bit about that, as I'm sure that's going to come up more in the discussion. But let's go back to the kind of the report and discuss a little bit more about what is a circular economy, right? Because it's talked about in many different circles. It's been defined in different ways. But you want to give a first kind of go at explaining how do we define it?
Yeah, there's been many attempts at defining it, and I understand where people are coming from. I mean, Bitcoin circular economies are a thing, but what is it exactly? So I would actually like point to the Federation of Bitcoin Circular Economies, who have been thinking about this from their angle. And maybe their angle is like a unique angle because particularly because like they are connected with a lot of Bitcoin circular economies. Like they have to talk to the people on the ground and evaluate, like, does it qualify according to our principles? And they have like a program according to whether you qualify or not, that you then go through. But I think, you know, I would argue like a Bitcoin circular economy is a place where as money by the participants of that economy, for receiving payments, for sending payments, for storing value, and maybe even in some places to price things or to as a unit of account. But in general, I think it's like I adhere to like the very wide definition. Like if a place, whether it's a physical territory that is clearly defined, like El Zonte is, like a village that lives in meat space, or whether it is like an online community like Nostr, or sub-communities of Nostr, where Bitcoin is the native currency, where people send value with, receive value with, be it for value, like tips and just showing appreciation, or even for payments. I think that economy is growing a lot, and as well. And I think there are people who would argue that's a Bitcoin circular economy too. I keep myself personally out of that discussion because um, I like to see both flourish and grow. I think the Federation of Bitcoin Circular Economies like has to have some kind of definition in order to, put, okay, you're just starting out, you're already a little bit more progressed, you are already like next level. So they have different problems, they have different challenges, they have different next steps. And so it's for them like easier to categorize like different efforts into stages. Um, so for them to have that definition makes a lot of sense. Um, but in general, I would say like any attempt at bringing about the future that we as Bitcoiners and the Bitcoin movement want to see, and namely replacing fiat money, using Bitcoin instead, building civilizations on a sound money standard, as we had before fiat money existed. Um, every attempt in that direction is a Bitcoin circular economy attempt, or must be, in order to be successful. And so that's
Right.
my personal view, but curious to hear how you think about it.
Yeah, I think you've kind of nailed it. The Federation of Bitcoin Circular Economies talks about these different indicators, talks about it as when people earn, spend, and save in Bitcoin. You have basically attempts of creating education, local leadership, merchant adoption, and like in integrating tools that make transacting in sats easy and reliable. But ultimately, as a movement, as you mentioned, it's trying to move beyond Bitcoin as a tool for saving, and well, saving is a part of it. Actually, maybe even teaching people about saving, what Bitcoin does, but also moving into an asset that people can actually use as money, as everyday money, as the meme goes. So yeah, I think you've kind of, yeah. I think that makes total sense, and you can define in different ways, have different metrics for it. But ultimately, it's moving narrative wise into essentially seeing Bitcoin in a completely different way, right? Seeing Bitcoin as a tool that people use to exchange value, and which gets us to the next question, which is why does this matter? Right? Why does it matter to create these attempts of using Bitcoin as everyday money? What does it tell us about Bitcoin? What does it tell us about Bitcoin adoption? And here we get into this other slide, which I think is really, really powerful, really, really important, um, which is this different modalities of adoption of seeing Bitcoin adoption happen. And on we talk a lot about Bitcoin country. There's the idea of Bitcoin being a Bitcoin politicians. You have Trumps, you have these different entities that actually wanna apply the change kind of top down. And I mean, to be fair, the leaders are often democratically elected, not always, right? But they are, and they can, and they, it is, I think the top down actually aspect is very much a reflection of the bottom sentiments. So it's not the top down approach. Top down is also is really important. And here we say that in the report, policy institutional decisions can play an important role in supporting Bitcoin adoption. Measures such as recognizing Bitcoin as legal tender or removing capital gains tax can clarify the rules and make it easier for individuals to spend and use Bitcoin in daily life. So actually, top down is very important to make it, to create the environment where people can actually save, use Bitcoin as spending as well. And in the West and in Europe especially, we see attempts to actually stifle Bitcoin as circular economy through top-down approaches, right? So we don't want to say the top-down is not important, has no meaning. It really, really does. But what we're trying to get to this report, and we can discuss more at length, is that transformative ideas often spread through people and communities first, and Bitcoin is not only a monetary system, but also a philosophical one, and encourages individuals to move from living according to external financial standards towards taking greater ownership of their money and economic choices. So to see this kind of, you mentioned that the transformation going beyond the fiat world, fiat mentality, that's what Bitcoin enables. And for that to really say that has been succeeded, you need to have this change happening at the micro level, right? People need to be able to spend freely, right? People need to be able to spend in the first place through digital money, which many people in the world are not able to. And yeah, a lot of these movements in history have happened bottom up. A lot of religions have in the past, And actually, there's this really interesting quote I heard recently, which is there's there's no stronger idea. There's no stronger force in the world than the idea whose time has come. And this kind of thing captures the sentiment of this movement, that needs to have this strong solid base. And Bitcoin circular economies are that can create that environment where they can create this environment and structure to see Bitcoin as a tool that people can use for ultimately for freedom, right? I don't know if you have anything more to add here on this point.
Yeah, sure. So I I think there is maybe worth double clicking on why durable cultural shift happens or must happen in a bottom up fashion, and why it can never really happen in a top down fashion in a sustainable way. As we see again and again in real life examples, El Salvador being one, Central African Republic being one, other countries, other places that made like big announcements about how they are now favorable to Bitcoin, like having regressions. But what remains is like the real people that use Bitcoin that really push adoption. And I think there is a reason for that, and that is incentives. A government like Bitcoin is a huge disruption to the existing power systems, which rely on and are based on something I regard as a scam, which is like the fiat money system, where whoever is close to the money printer can, finance their worldview and push it onto others, and keep themselves in a position where they benefit asymmetrically more than others. And so it becomes a game of yeah, having power over other people. And Bitcoin really shifts like the balance in favor of the individual, because it's very empowering tool and empowering it,
Yeah, like
concept.
philosophy,
It's a
right?
very empowering concept that you can,
Right.
store value in a cryptographic way just by remembering 12 words and keeping them secure, that nobody can take away from you, even if, like they came after you with violence and shot you dead. And like it's like close to unconfiscatable money, and it's basically renders like violence moot. Like it's you can't really apply violence anymore as effectively to get what you want in a world where Bitcoin is used, and you have to rather cooperate in order to get what you want. So I think like there's a very deep philosophical thing also that's been pointed out in a very good book that's existed before Bitcoin came around, which is The Sovereign Individual, which has been
Yeah.
describing exactly these shifts in power dynamics and the asymmetry that is shifting things in favor of the individual. And so Bitcoin is a tool for that. And another aspect is also that, top-down movements, like they are easy to subvert, and they are basically just piggybacking on the sentiment that is in the bottom up to collect votes from them in a democracy. just playing along to get elected and to get then into power and then do whatever benefits them until like it's election time again. So I think I see it that way. Like top down, I agree, it's not entirely bad, and people who are working on making, like, bringing about more favorable, more reasonable laws in their respective parliaments is a good thing, but it can only be complementary. And right now, I think it's like not very effective. Like I see like almost Bitcoiners who are using Bitcoin as a persecuted minority, um, who are being slapped by respective books with weird charges of, you know, anti-money laundering and terrorist financing and all sorts of accusations, just to extract their personal identifiable data from them and collect them in honeypots, which is a very dangerous thing in a world where just last weekend Palantir published a manifesto where they said that hard power will be built on software. And I think the second thing that they said that really like rubbed me the wrong way, and also a lot of other people online, is that they said that there are different civilizations and some have pushed the needle in and made great advances, and others remain dysfunctional and regressive. And I think, like, in a world where this kind of data harvesting, data mining company that is coupling data with AI and using it to exert a very particular worldview onto the world with software that they regard as hard power, I think it becomes very relevant that we need, like, how individual users protect themselves, protect their data, use open and we can talk about like how to do that maybe later on. But I'll stop here, and I think like Bitcoin is like a very important tool, um, and Bitcoin circular economies are like keeping that tool sharp because that tool is being used in them, and valuable feedback is coming from Bitcoin circular economies that help the developers to further refine, further fine tune these tools for the new threat models that are emerging in this changing environment that we're living in.
Awesome. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear, your way of saying it, because it really showcases Bitcoin as a piece of a puzzle within a broader, not just economic, but really geopolitical power game, right? And it's a power game not just made of the made of nations, but it's made of the tension between individual and the state. And any attempt, and I think, as you mentioned earlier on in the podcast, the fact that the states are never going to be truly incentivized to create a system where Bitcoin is fully used as everyday money, because it goes entirely against their philosophy, against their interests. And so even when talking about, say Trump is talking about Bitcoin and goes to Bitcoin conferences, he's still creating a narrative around it that is a very different narrative than what we're talking about here today. It's important to clarify. You have the European, very much left-leaning technocrats that just hate Bitcoin and call it a Ponzi scheme or a tool for criminals. And then you have, this new emergent political top-down narrative of Bitcoin as a great sovereign tool for holding, which is still, again, sort of bucketed within this very, very particular niche, which is very, you could say it's an evolution, but it's still very remote concept compared to what we're talking about here, which is Bitcoin as a tool for total individual sovereignty and and power, with shift power into the hands of the individual, especially in a world of becoming incredibly increasingly dangerous technocratic power, censorship, and all sorts of things we're seeing with Palantir. So yeah, I totally agree. Um, so let's get into the weeds. We're half an hour in, so let's get into a little bit. What are we talking about here when we're talking about circular economies in more detail? And I think it's good to talk about, well, first of all, a quick look into like just the big bang explosion of circular economies that we've seen. This is even a little bit old for now, but it is absolutely incredible. We have over 200 circular economies on geysers that are looking for donations, selling products, showcasing that they have community support. And let's get into it, and we can also kind of bring up some of the examples we've experienced. I think that's really important. So Bitcoin Beach, we've talked about the kind of create the first blueprint, the rise of circular economies globally. This was a few years ago. Circular economies are raising quite a lot of support from the Bitcoin community globally. Um, Again, this is really global. I'll probably highlight South America and Africa are some of the regions with highest growth, which is really, really beautiful to see. So here are some of the examples. So Bitcoin Berlin, I believe you've been there, Kamal, right?
Oh yes, I have been there multiple times. I think twice, and it's a beautiful example of a Bitcoin circular economy. I would say it's in El Salvador, in the west of El Salvador. It's a mountain village, a little bit remote, so a little bit, um, yeah, like not on your regular tourist path. But it is a very vibrant Bitcoin circular economy with one of the highest um, Bitcoin usage per capita, merchants per capita in the world. I think there are over 160 merchants, more than the Berlin in Germany, which is the German
Yes.
capital, which has 3 million inhabitants. I think I'm not exactly sure how many inhabitants Berlin and El Salvador has, maybe a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, you can buy anything um, you want with Bitcoin there. Almost at every merchant, you can pay with Bitcoin, and it's being regularly used. There is a good good approach with education, paired with education and utility. Like Bitcoin is solving real problems there, and people embrace it because who doesn't like problems being solved and their life becoming easier and more secure and their future more certain. And they went through a couple. They already went through a bear market, so and they still are there accepting. So they see the ups, they see the downs, and once you see like a circular economy go have a couple of years on their belt, under their belt, like 4 to 5 years, and they saw like a bear market and a bull market, like people really, it really clicks, and they understand that Bitcoin is not just for convenient, secure, irreversible payments, global, with low fees, but it is also a hard asset that's actually worth saving because nobody can print it out of thin air. So, like the long-term thesis, I guess, is like coming from Austrian economics, where it is argued, and it makes logical sense, that why save a money that is inflationary, that will depreciate in its purchasing power tomorrow. The logical thing to do is to spend it today and buy something that you need, even if you don't necessarily need it, because tomorrow you might not be able to purchase that thing with the same amount of money anymore because your purchasing power will have degraded. So what that leads to is consumerism, which is like a civilizational issue or almost a disease, high time preference, seeking of instant gratification, hedonism, not thinking ahead, not planning, not having hope for the future, not building families, not creating buildings that last for centuries, thinking of creating a dynasty in your family, but rather, just living in today and living paycheck to paycheck, getting rid of your inflationary money as fast as possible, as long as it still has purchasing power. So that's like really where we will see the effect of Bitcoin circular economies when that thesis plays out over like a decade or two, when the people that adopted it will prosper and be healthy and be valuable citizens for their community who build things, because they have like the correct mindset, low time preference of planning ahead, thinking ahead, cooperating, and not buying the first thing that they saw an ad for, because they're tempted to it, but rather it instills this mindset that, hey, do I really need this, or should I rather, if I don't need it, save this Bitcoin. Over time, what Bitcoin does is it goes up in purchasing power. And if I don't need it right now very urgently, let me postpone this purchase. And in 1 year, I might get 10 of it, right? If I save onto it. Now, people say like, oh, this is hoarding, etc. But no, I don't believe that. Like some people argue, oh, what will happen to our economy? All the demand will be gone. Yeah, I mean, most of the demand is fake. It's plastic demand, um, where people are, manipulated into buying stuff they don't need, that will break after first usage because the quality is just so inferior, and so it's getting rid of that part, which was already like, I would say like malicious part of the economy that nobody will be sad if we lost it.
Yeah, absolutely. When people bring up that example, I always like to highlight this chart because for those who studied economics, I studied a bit of economics myself, and there's this really, really cool chart. Chart. It's the equation of what is GDP, right? You can criticize GDP as well many ways, but GDP is consumption, investment, government spending, exports, and imports. And the Keynesian model is all about getting consumption up to to the point that people are consuming when they have literally no money, and that's we're reaching the end of that game. Well, we probably have quite a bit more to go, but it's absolutely unsustainable. But then you have the investment spending, which is, if you think about it, the long term growth model, and the degree of and the investment spending has gone so down now because people are like you said, paying buying things paycheck to paycheck. They're using everything they have into consumption, responding to those ad stimulus, and the entire culture around investment is actually just it's all about gambling. Even investment is gambling, which is a form of consumption. And so Bitcoin is almost like the only way of investment that we have right now in the world, and that is also investment. Um, Investment spending, right? So once you get your purchasing power up, you can invest in things. That's where true growth happens longer term, and that's what Bitcoiners are doing. So Bitcoiners are very much oriented towards a growth-based model, but more sustainable and more longer lasting and more future proof. So there's a really cool way of thinking about it as well. But yeah, agree with everything you said, and I think, yeah, just to add to the Berlin story, also been there. It is really incredible going around, and I think there's a bit of a transformative experience that comes with going there, and actually spending your Sats. It's almost magical, and I recommend everyone to give that a shot. It helps you to think about Bitcoin in a very different way. Um, and yeah, where is yeah, and pulling that up, I think. Oh, there it is. Yeah, yeah, and there's this really cool, I think, a really interesting piece of the report I'd like to highlight here, which is how Bitcoin happens at the grassroots. So talking at the micro level, how are Bitcoin circular economies enabling adoption to happen? And so here we say, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Bitcoin adoption can't just be about stockpiling; it must also be about circulation. Spending leads to sats flowing in the economy. Merchants begin accepting. Locals begin saving. and visitors become investors, and a self-sustaining system begins to emerge. And so in Berlin, the key is for Bitcoin expats and travelers to spend their Bitcoin and bring sats into the local economy that then people can use to save and to spend and create this essentially stockpile, saved, spent, and reinvested Bitcoin. So this is a really, I think, begins to kind of crystallize a little more what we mean by Bitcoin circular economies being a really important pillar of Bitcoin adoption. Well, because they are essentially a way for Bitcoin to flow into the economy and and actually then grow it. Because the second point is that looking at Metcalfe's law, um, which states that essentially a network effect is proportional to is the value of the network effect is proportional to the square of the number of connected users. Well, you are a more connected user if you are spending your Bitcoin. If you're just buying Bitcoin, you are a kind of more narrow connected user. You're connected more to like one source of the node, which is the Bitcoin exchange. But as soon as you start spending, you become a more integrated part of the network, and by doing so, you can argue very confidently that you're creating a more resilient, a more robust network, right? Where people actually interact more generally with each other. While if you're just holding Bitcoin, you're still creating a network. You still are connected user within the network, but a much more narrow in a much more narrow way. Anything else to add here, Kamal?
Yeah, I think Metcalfe's law is like a really interesting way to think about Bitcoin payments adoption, because it's just so rewarding, and in the adopter's favor, basically. Because as you can see here in this graphic, let's say you have three people who are accepting Bitcoin and able to pay in Bitcoin. You have basically like three links. Um, but if that number of nodes goes up, the number of links goes up uh, to the square of the number of connected users, which is amazing in our favor. And because just adding one person, yeah, like you get like quadratic return. Because, and what is that return? The return is that the utility of your Bitcoin increases. And that is really, really important from a lot of angles. Even like Metcalfe's law has been used in Bitcoin a lot, but I think it has been misapplied in the past.
Right.
People were thinking of nodes as like the Bitcoin full nodes that people are
Hmm.
running. It doesn't relate to that. Metcalfe's law is about communication networks, and the Bitcoin payments network, right?
Mm,
It's the people that can communicate value with Bitcoin,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So it is not necessarily whether you run a node, whether it's self-custodial. It's purely whether you can be paid in Bitcoin or your services can be paid in Bitcoin, and even like whether they can be paid in Lightning, in Spark, in Arc, in on-chain, in eCash. Like those are all connections, and increasing like that. It's basically increasing interoperability, and making Bitcoin more useful. And we know that the value of something is derived from its scarcity and its utility. And the supply of Bitcoin is fixed, and the demand is the variable here, right? That determines even the Bitcoin exchange rate. And and the demand is a derivative of the utility something gives you. So making Bitcoin more useful, like you can do it by increasing the Bitcoin payments network, according to Metcalfe's law. I think it even makes like a direct statement about the value of a network that is
Right.
proportional to the square of the number of connected users. And
Right.
so currently, like the most valuable network um, in the world that we have for communications is SMS, which is quite surprising because it is such an old network and people don't talk about it so much because there is no token tied to it. But if you look around, like when you download a new app and you have to create an account and you put in your phone number or your email address, but phone number is generally like what's most prevalent
Right.
because you get the OTP, the one-time password via SMS, especially with global apps, because SMS is just everywhere. Like it has like the widest adoption, it has the highest communications network value, and that's why most applications use it. So yeah, it's a useful framework, I would say, to think about Bitcoin adoption and how it fits into, as a strategic part of the Bitcoin movement that needs to be paid attention to if the whole thing is to succeed.
Yeah, yeah. And to this SMS point, they don't have a token, you don't have no SMS token, but there's such a thing as, very prevalent spam, right? And what is that? That's probably someone paying someone else to have access to certain data about users in a network. So yeah, who knows how valuable that entire network is? Probably is pretty valuable considering how many users it has. Um, and yeah, but yeah, totally not hugely monetizable, but still definitely is. Yeah, and to the point of the yeah, I think we've discussed quite in depth already the network thesis. And again, I think, yeah, it speaks volumes to how the value of the Bitcoin network can actually bring, and the value of the Bitcoin network can also be represented in the overall value of the Bitcoin assets. But those things are also a little bit different. um, in any case, it definitely can lead to the growth of Bitcoin as an asset as well in terms of price. Um, and because again, it brings up the value. And you guys at Blink probably have a very, very unique insight into that world, because you guys are seeing a lot of activity happen, I suppose, in Africa and South America. I'm not sure if there's maybe some quick glimpse you can give us about that, some insights into where you're seeing a lot of this growth, some interesting examples. And speaking of examples, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Kenya, because I keep hearing Kenya is like the one of the hottest place when it comes to adopting Bitcoin as money. So if you could provide more insights on that, I'll bring up some examples from the research. But I think yeah, I'll let you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, about Blink and what we see, Blink is like, I would say, like, I guess it's fair to say it's like the favorite weapon of choice of
Right.
many Bitcoin circular economies that want to use Bitcoin as money, because we have been really like laser focused on making it a tool that works for Bitcoin maximalists who want to help others adopt Bitcoin. Like that's our mission. We build tools for Bitcoin maximalists who are, pushing this Bitcoin movement forward towards, the original dream, that the original vision of where we want to get to with this. Um, and so a lot of people are using it, but it's not the only tool that people use, which is very important that it's not. But nevertheless, we have like a really good insight, I would say. And maybe also I should add that we're not spending any, meaningful amount of marketing or ads or anything. Really, it's organic growth, um, word of mouth, community leaders, onboarding merchants, onboarding community members, onboarding newbies to Bitcoin, teaching them the first thing about Bitcoin. And I mean, one reason or one area, like you pointed out earlier, like we're mostly active in Latin America, Africa, what you would broadly refer to as the global south, or even the global majority countries that are not like these Europes and UKs and US, where, you know, regulation is like the biggest industry almost, particularly in the European Union, and they're trying to export that regulation because of their own incentives. So that is particularly like really a problem in these places, paired with obviously like the inflation is not as bad as in global south countries for the euro and the United States dollar. So they have relatively stable currencies. So that like that is not the driving vector for adoption, but the regulation, AML, CFT, whatever that is a blocker in many places. And altogether, like there is not a pressing need. Also because of the existence of, excellent legacy banking infrastructure and payments infrastructure in the first world, so to say. So there are efforts to do this, but where we see like real demand because of a pressing need, because Bitcoin significantly improves the lives of people, is in places where inflation is high, traditional banking system does not exist, is exclusive to people in low income brackets. Also in places where, like people don't have a passport or documentation or ID, refugees who just cannot create a legacy bank account, or like low income people who are just unprofitable for banks to open an account with. Like the banks really like did us a favor with their predatory practices in the past. Like a lot of people just reject them outright. Entire communities just don't want to deal with it. There are huge informal economies in, for example, South Africa that are just living outside of the white market, and it's huge. They don't want to deal with governments. They don't want to deal with banks. They just do their own thing. They find the tools. They build their own tools that work for them, that they control, that they manage as a community, and that is very, very exciting. And it's growing organically, even like in the places like as well in Kenya. Like I think Afribit Kibera in Nairobi is like one of the biggest informal towns on the African continent, and they have a pressing need. And I think one thing about Kenya to point out, since you asked, is like that Kenya has like a huge advantage because they have been introduced to digital money that you manage on your phone in 2008 with the emergence of USSD interfaces and M-Pesa. M-Pesa is a mobile money that started out in Kenya by it's a private project by Safaricom, and what it did is basically give anybody who has a feature phone, like a dumb phone, like pre-smartphones. It's actually, do I have one of them here? I can see it. You can just use them, like these old Nokia phones, and and you can send and receive money to your phone number, and it's been like people are used to that concept in Kenya already. So the transition to Bitcoin is easy because a lot of these things that need to be learned or understood are already understood thanks to M-Pesa, but also because Bitcoin is strictly better than M-Pesa in terms of inflation. It's not tied to a national currency that's the government can print more of. It is not tied to one mobile operator. In this case of M-Pesa, it's Safaricom, and it is not necessarily always interoperable with other service providers that are entering the market to offer this. It is not interoperable across borders, so you cannot. Like mobile money has spread from Kenya to many other African countries like Uganda, Ghana, Zambia,
Right. And
and
Kemal, sorry to kind of interject, but quickly, because we're kind of running out of time. I want to steer you in a particular direction. So I'm curious if you have any kind of interesting insights, because we're talking about circular economies. So let's just to clarify, what did the circular economy hubs play, right? For example, in you mentioned in this town in Kenya, what was the town you mentioned? Um,
Kibera.
Kibera, right? The city, really, rather. So the hub is really basically set up, and it's a Bitcoin center, right? And they do education, do immersion and board, and do education about what is Bitcoin. And the results have been staggering, right? And just more concretely, what impact are we seeing there? And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, I don't know if it's some generic numbers, but from what I
I cannot
understand, there's
tell you. I haven't visited Kenya or Kibera, unfortunately, yet. I hope I can go and visit sometime in the future. But if you're asking about the hubs, like the community centers in particular,
right.
so I've seen, for example, the Bitcoin Ekasi Education Center in Mossel Bay, and also
Yeah.
the Bitcoin House in in the Hope House in Bitcoin Beach, as well as the Hub in Berlin. So those are centers that I've visited, and it's a community meeting point where almost at any time there is like somebody knowledgeable about Bitcoin where a community member can go to and ask questions if they have some issues, and they will be pointed in the right direction. You know, Bitcoin doesn't have a customer support line because it's not a centralized company. So these
Right.
community hubs are fulfilling basically that
Right.
function in one way. On the other hand, like we talked about the bad incentives of governments to really introduce Bitcoin properly. As a consequence, you don't get, you know, good Bitcoin education in schools, in public schools, and in the education system. So they are also fulfilling like this role of providing accurate education about Bitcoin. Um, Also, what they're doing is they're providing on ramps and off ramps. So oftentimes you will find a Bitcoiner there who will help you either buy Bitcoin or learn how to get Bitcoin if you in exchange for cash, or if you need to, you know, break up some savings because you have some merchant to pay or a supplier to pay who doesn't accept Bitcoin yet, you can go there and they will help you how to convert your Bitcoin into cash and you know make it useful. And there are also like parts where they're identifying the problems because since they're a hub, they learn all the challenges that make using Bitcoin hard. So they aggregate all the knowledge in the community, and then you know they talk to the developers in the community who have like development skills to solve these with technology. And we see that really across the board. But they're not just Bitcoin related hubs. Like they're real human
Right.
community hubs. Like there, I've seen
Mm,
people come to the Bitcoin Ekasi Center, like mothers with newborns who don't have fresh water, and they would get help from the Bitcoin Ekasi Center in the form of clean water, right? That they can
right.
create. There would be English lessons, there would be computer lessons, there would be digital literacy lessons, there would be general human soft skill lessons, you know, that are being taught in order for a healthy community. Like anything, like Bitcoin is just part of usually the tool set and the areas of engagement of these people who run these community centers. It is a valuable tool, but it is not just Bitcoin. It is like very, very holistic. Usually, what we see is that these projects that become or build out these community centers, they didn't think like, oh, I want to drive Bitcoin adoption. Now I heard that I should do a community center. Most of the time, they were NGOs that have existed for a long time already, pre-Bitcoin. And they were doing social work, community work in the form of, you know, civil service, communications, English lessons, computer lessons, cleaning the beach in El Zonte from dirt and dangerous glass pieces and stuff, being organizing lifeguards and stuff. Um, and Bitcoin is just one part of the curriculum in these community hubs of a more general education that is necessary in order to prevail as a good member of a community in a village, in a town. So I think that's like really important to point out. So for example, in the case of the Bitcoin Beach, there has been like a community program that has started in 1980s or 1990s, I think even, for many years. In the case of Bitcoin Ekasi, there was a non-profit called the Surfer Kids that was teaching kids from the township coming from really low income brackets to learn surfing because and they make like amazing progress teaching these kids to surf, and they win like competitions nowadays because they have fostered this culture of excellence in them, and they become like great role models for their communities. That yes, even though I am from this community that is marginalized, that is poor, that is bad education, sanitation, all these things, there is a way out for me if I take the right steps, and it's possible. And so I think it's amazing work that these people are doing. Also in Kibera, it's not just Afribit Kibera, let's do Bitcoin. No, there is
Hmm.
like Ronnie in that community that has been doing social work for a decade, um, and they just like recognize Bitcoin as a indispensable tool in their tool set of their general social work, to do things right, especially for the most vulnerable. Um, and um,
Yeah.
and if Bitcoin works for them, from like our perspective, it is also like a really great argument um, against all the headwinds that we face, like the accusations that Bitcoin is for terrorists and criminals and money launderers and all that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and a hammer is a tool, and you can use it to put a nail in the wall to hang up a nice picture, or you can, crush people's heads with it. Um, you know,
Yeah.
there is no point in trying to nerf tools and make them unusable for their original purpose, just because there are people who abuse them. So, and it's really important to show like the good that Bitcoin does, and I think nobody does it better than these communities who are working, particularly like with people who are uh, not privileged, but rather at the other end of society.
Beautifully said, Kamal. I couldn't have said it better. And I'll just kind of further highlight what you said, which is several things, right? But one is that these hubs are essentially the gateway for locals into Bitcoin. They're that human interface. They're also not just about Bitcoin. They are essentially providing the tool that is Bitcoin and all the tools built on top of Bitcoin, like Blink, which is digital money banking, right? Like BTC Maps, like gives them access to merchants, like Geyser, allow them to get access to fundraising, and in the future, micro lending, and there's and more and more and more of these tools will emerge, um, that gives tools, hammers, to your point, to these locals that didn't have any tools before. So actually, I just want to highlight quickly something because we're working on a really cool thing on Geyser right now, just very much connected to this, which is bringing education about fundraising to the locals through Bitcoin Circular Economy hubs. So we actually did when we were in Berlin, we did a workshop there where we highlighted what we can do with Bitcoin. Well, you can fundraise from people around the world, and this project actually I have a better video of it. This project um, um, was created to basically beautify the town, and I believe it was a was it Gerardo, I believe, Rodrigo. Yeah, he basically brought all his 20 friends that are graffiti makers from all around the country in El Salvador and to Berlin to beautify the town, and to create essentially un museo a cielo aperto, a museum on the open sky on the town. And that has attracted a lot more tourism, a lot more, has made the town beautiful. And that has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but it's about what Bitcoin has done to the community. Similarly, we are doing more of these workshops through these Bitcoin hubs leaders about how Bitcoin can allow them to empower them um, through these uh, uh, can empower them through to fundraise. So we have here an example of Node Nation, well, Pupulas G, doing a monthly meetup, explaining them what the power of Bitcoin fundraising. And so here he is, explaining. We provided him a presentation that he can use, and then out of that came out some really interesting projects, none to do with Bitcoin, right? They're all about how, actually there's a huge problem of trash on their main tourist attraction, and they're just gonna do a little fundraiser to raise funds for um, for collecting trash all around the tourist area. And they're gonna maybe make some t-shirts, call themselves, the whatever the project name is, and create a little volunteer movement around it, and then any funding can just help them to do more of that. So it's really about what Bitcoin unlocks and enables for local communities, and it can be a really, really powerful way to, yeah, to make their to kind of empower local realities, to empower local communities, which is another word for circular economies. Circular economies are empowering local grassroots economies, really. So yeah, some really cool, really powerful examples of Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin in action, really, Bitcoin in action in local economies. Um, uh, and all we needed to do is do these workshops, and actually, we're not even doing them ourselves now. It's just the community leaders doing the workshop about crowdfunding, Bitcoin crowdfunding, and then the workshops end with how can we improve our town in our collective interest, right? How can, if we come together, what can we do to improve it? And it's really as simple as that. I don't know if you have any final thoughts on that, Kamal. And I know we have some thoughts about how do we go from this to like entrepreneurship as well. Maybe you can mention a bit of that.
First of all, big shout out to Pupusa G, who has been a relentless educator in El Salvador, teaching youth how to run Bitcoin full nodes, and yeah, built Node Nation, and it's really like one of the like bottom up Salvadoran projects and educators pushing Bitcoin adoption relentlessly in meetups face to face. Yeah, shout out to Pupusa G.
Great. Hero.
Um, yeah. Sorry, what was your question about entrepreneurship?
Right, yeah, because we're talking about tools, right? You have fundraising tools, you have micro lending tools, you have, entrepreneurship tools, right?
Yeah, so I think it's never been a better time to become an entrepreneur uh, than now, because you can really follow the lean startup approach with very little costs, and leverage all of the AI tools that are now becoming available at an increasing pace to basically boost your productivity immensely, lever it 100x, 1000x, instead of looking at costs of hiring a developer, a designer, and all of these things. One thing that's really important about entrepreneurship is that you get out something quick, and get feedback and fail quickly with little sunk cost, and iterate on the learnings that you have. So if you identify a problem, like build a solution quick and dirty and see why it doesn't work, so you can, fix that part as well, and iterate, and constant iteration. Never been a better time to do it than now. So I think if people are curious, I, I gave a master class recently to Africa free routing, where I introduced some tools for non-developers to get started with developing and building tools. I'm, as you can see from my cap, like big proponent of open source software. I think it's a huge catalyst for the Bitcoin movement, because not everybody has to start from zero and can reuse code, pick and choose, cherry pick from things that they've seen around the world to build local custom solutions that work for their environment. That is usually a little bit different than all the other environments that people have. So some customization locally is important, and open source is like great fuel for that. Um,
Right. I think that's awesome, and that sums it up. And I think you anyway. You're working on some other elements of entrepreneurship at the local level that might become one of the another of these tools that could be leveraged at the through the community hubs. But so the bigger picture really here is like trying to explain the thesis on the circular economies. I think we've done a good job at that, and we've highlighted hubs as these critical bridges, right, between the kind of Bitcoin community, sort of the cyberspace community, to being this really real local grassroots thing that connects local realities to Bitcoin. And I think there's actually two documentaries coming out, one by Mi Primer Bitcoin, another one by Motive Peru, and they're both going to be looking at the transformational powers of Bitcoin and how that happens through the community hubs. So I'm really looking forward to this report. It's a small attempt to kind of tell that story. We're going to be spreading a lot more of the word about it in the next coming weeks and months. We're going to be, and as I mentioned, we're working more and more and more now on just developing this relationship with these hubs to bring these tools for fundraising and micro lending to these communities that didn't have these tools previously. So we're going to be telling more and more of these stories, and I'm sure we'll be bumping shoulders along with Blink always, because you guys are a key part of that infrastructure. And yeah, I think it's really about empowering these local realities with these new tools, and hubs can be this critical bridge between us, the broad Bitcoin community, with the local realities. And the key, like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of look at the impact it's having on people on the ground. It's becoming less of a theory and more of a reality and experienced thing. So I'm really, really excited. Kemal, any final closing words about this, or maybe some thoughts of what should people look forward to? How do you start a circular economy, or resources to go to, or any final words of wisdom?
um, sure. I You mentioned the article that I shared
Yes,
just recently. I think there's like
bring those up.
some good connections there. Um, I have a question for you, or maybe even a feature request.
Let's do it.
Like we have talked about incentives a lot, and what I would like to see, I think it's great what Geyser is doing, like enabling many small projects in the global south to get some funds, get some donations, get some grants. But I think sustainability is really important, and that's why I also like care a lot about entrepreneurship, and about developing entrepreneurs who build sustainable businesses that provide services as critical infrastructure, like on and off ramps, for example, in their communities, which are very, very important for Bitcoin circular economy. If you want to start one, you need the way to, get Bitcoin
Yeah,
and or sell it and stuff. So what I would love to see really is like something like a venture capital feature, where people are not just receiving like one-time donations, but rather like they find partners in their enterprises, because it's a lot of like these enterprises like they need liquidity to finance their operations. There is like growing regulation that comes with license requirements that are obviously like designed to kill off some of the momentum that we have, and so there's like microloans for that's one solution. I would like to see like more of a risk sharing approach as well. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think I totally agree in terms of the value of entrepreneurship and the value of investment in companies. Um, the and I look forward to that world growing. And a lot of that growth so far has happened in the kind of cyberspace Bitcoin world. You have companies like um, Lightning Ventures, right? Like you have venture models, but it is very more like venture capital driven, more Western focused. If you're in Africa, you can't invest, so there's a problem of incorporation that's set to be solved, and maybe you guys are solving that. Um, but what the way that we see it is more is not an either or question. It's like these are all really important use cases. The question is what comes, where's the opportunity, what comes first. And we're focused so far, guys, are on the remit of donations, because we think it's a really valuable, really worthwhile and existing system, right? So if you look at the fiat world, you have companies like GoFundMe that are really powerful, but they're geographically not spread out, not distributed. They don't operate in Africa and South America where they really should be. So this is one key problem that we identified, and we think there's a very viable business model there. You then have other big companies that have to do with micro lending, like Kiva in the fiat world, and that's what we're trying to replicate now with Geyser microloans, and using Bitcoin and also in an ethical way. And I think this really much goes to your point of trying to get people with ideas but with no initial capital to get started. And I think the kind of investing in ideas works. But another really simple model is really, if you're looking to actually make an idea happen, a new project or an entrepreneurship happen, lending is the most is the simplest and cleanest way to do it without securities, because securities are highly regulated and it can be challenging, and you have all these legal questions of ownership, which can probably solve, but they're slightly, it's kind of it's a harder path to get there, in my opinion, for certain types of projects. And then we were looking at Geyser and there's quite a few percentage, there's quite a few projects that are coming out that are essentially looking for, they're like merchants or businesses that are looking to donate for donations to amplify what they're doing. And we're coming back to them saying, look, you're not looking for donations, you're looking for a loan. And so we're really responding directly to the push that we're getting from users. And so we're seeing that way, right? We're getting that pull, so we're kind of responding to it. So as of the next few weeks, we're going to be rolling out this Geyser micro lending, which is again leveraging the hubs as these center points, where the hubs are the verifiers, right? They are our trust network. They are projects that, like the circular economy hubs, can essentially vouch for you. And this is so important in the question whether it's micro lending or equity. You need someone on the ground that can really get a feel for you, and vouch for you, um, and see your proof of work, and do all sorts of due diligence if necessary. And I think this is how the hubs can become a really key part of that. And I think it's, again, like, it's true for microlending, but it's also true for equity. So as whoever, I'm sure equity is going to become a thing in the global south, and it should be. And I'm not sure who will be building it first. Someone has to at some point. um, but it's going to come together with equity in terms of but they're both solutions to the same problem of how do you bring capital to build out infrastructure in a way that the incentives are aligned, and it's not just a one-off, donation, but it's actually this thing where you get some money back. And the way that we're thinking about it, just to close it off, we're thinking to start off, it'll be either zero interest or a very, very low interest. And then that interest could even go to the Bitcoin Circular Economy Hub, so that this, kind of pays back for the work that they're doing in verifying, doing the due diligence on the projects that are emerging, and kind of keeping up to date with what's happening on these projects. So if you're interested, you can go on guys.fund/microloans, add in if you're interested as a borrower, as a lender, or both, add your name, and yeah, we can kind of learn more. We have already a pipeline of projects that could be really good fits for this. But what we're also building out is not just is that piece of the infrastructure of the hub that is the verifier, the portal, if you will, to access microlending. So you can start seeing how these circular economy hubs are not just are not just Bitcoin centers for education. They are they're providing education. They're providing on ramps and off ramps. They're providing merchant adoption. They're providing education of how to fundraise, and they're even providing education on how to access global capital for lending and increasing your business and empowering your entrepreneurship. um, and yeah, hopefully that also comes also together with what you're saying with equity. But we see it as a sort of stack, and there's a sequence to it. And I think microlending is a especially for the small mom and pop shops, that's kind of more, that's something that we see being quite a wide necessity. In terms of equity becomes really challenging in terms of, yeah, for all sorts of reasons. But also one of them is that it requires this notion of virality, and you know um, kind of this like one winner takes all, um, which can be really hard, and really, really a challenging thing to kind of, to bring in. So yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well. But and by the way, I'll love to see how we can explore this together with Blink, because there's so many ways for us to partner on this idea into the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, like sometimes I feel like in order to make an apple pie, you have to invent the universe in a bit. And that's like what we have to do in order for Bitcoin to, become a viable alternative by doing all the things. Like these are not new things, but we need to do
Yeah.
them in the Bitcoin space, in the Bitcoin way. Like, for example, Mohammed Yunus, I think in Bangladesh, with the Grameen Bank, showed how micro lending can be like help their community
Right.
in a massive way. So I'm curious to check that out. Happy to discuss. We'll also be maybe find a solution for that incorporation problem,
Mm.
that we mentioned. We have some ideas, but can't share more as of now. But yeah, I think I'm very thankful for the work that you're doing, Mick, with Geyser and with the Bitcoin Circular Economies, and for helping to bring the tools that these communities that are really pushing our movement forward, like um, that they need. And thank you for having me as well on your show.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm incredibly thankful for what you guys are doing, providing this critical infrastructure to, yeah, to onboard people easily into Bitcoin. And I think we're so aligned on the philosophy of it all. And yeah, really appreciate being in this journey with you guys, with you, Kamal. And yeah, hopefully we have more to share. Maybe I think we'll do more of these. We'll go more into discussion on the micro lending, and maybe we can even have another chat, when it comes to equity and down the line if needed. And again, if there's ways for us to refer to the equity stuff that you're thinking about, we can also do that. But yeah, again, thank you so much. We're a little over time, quite a bit over time. So yeah, we'll get all this stuff out in the next few days. So yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Mick. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.